Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session. We'll get started as you guys get fully logged in. It takes a while to get everybody in, but it looks like folks were prompt and are streaming in pretty quickly. So we'll get started in about a minute. So hang tight as we get everybody logged in, and then we'll start moving through. Okay, everyone. We're trying to get all of our panelists on and make sure everything is going well there. And I'll welcome you to this session. This is session 2. It's actually session 2, topic 2, financing of our preservation programs and rehabilitation, and also called alternative financing. I'm Robin Wolf. I'm the Senior Program Director of Rural Housing for Enterprise Community Partners, and I'm excited for you guys to be here for this session for the Colorado Rural Housing Preservation Academy. A few housekeeping notes. You probably heard as you logged in, the webinar is being recorded and all audience members are muted as they log in. Please use our chat feature or our Q&A. Most of you on this call have been on our presentations before, so should be pretty familiar, but if you have anything that you want to ask us or have any questions, please use that chat feature. Also, the Q&A works, and there is a raise hand feature that I can see, and I'm sorry, like my view is different than yours, so I really don't know how you access it, but just know that it's available to you. Everybody's going to receive a copy of today's webinar recording and the PowerPoint slides from our presenters, and of course, it is a different virtual world, and sometimes we run into some difficulties, particularly as we work to patch a whole bunch of folks together as we are today from multiple places. So please be patient with us as we move forward on that together. Thank you. Today we'll do welcome and introductions. As I said, I'm Robin Wolf with Enterprise Community Partners. We're joined also by our program associate, Adrienne Norwood, who is a tremendous help on the back end. You might not see her, but she's helping us to make sure that this presentation runs smoothly. Then we'll do CDFIs, have a conversation with 2 of our CDFIs here in the state of Colorado, and talk about the Impact Development Fund and the Enterprise Community Loan Fund. There'll be a 5-minute break, and then we will not talk about 538 guaranteed loans. We will be talking about other outside of the box programming featuring Energy Outreach Colorado and also Sharing Connexion. And then we'll have a few questions and wrap up. Here at Enterprise, our mission and our vision are that one day every person will have an affordable home in a vibrant community filled with promise and the opportunity for a good life. Our mission is to create opportunity for low and moderate income people through affordable housing in diverse and thriving communities. The rural program and the rural and Native American program in particular is providing funding and technical assistance to organizations to help create healthy, safe, green, and affordable housing in rural and native communities. And our priorities consist of preserving affordable rural rental housing, like we're talking about through this academy, and the delivery of trainings and peer-to-peer learning sessions to help rural housing providers acquire and or preserve rent-restricted housing in their communities. So that gives you an entree to why we're doing the Colorado Rural Housing Preservation Academy, and that's a series of trainings where I think something like 6 sessions in. We have many more to go. Here are some of our topics. I did send out, and our team has sent out an email with all of the times for the rest of the year. During break, Adrian will share a link with you for those so that you can register for the rest of the sessions. We're really particularly excited. I'm excited about all of the sessions, but we're really particularly excited about the Buyer and Seller Conference. We have made it a regional event. Because we're in this virtual format, it's easier for us to do that, to make it a regional conversation. And in making it a regional conversation, we've been able to get folks from the National USDA office, Nancy Ann Bodell, who's the director of multifamily housing, and members of her team. And also we have folks from the National Low Income Housing Coalition and our policy team at Enterprise, who will be talking about some of the recent publications they've put out, especially related to preservation. So that'll be a great session on September 23rd. And of course, I have to thank our partners, the Colorado Health Foundation, Fannie Mae, and the Colorado Trust, who helped to support our work to make this possible and to make having this platform available to y'all, and all of the things that make putting these trainings together possible. Also, I want to make sure we talk and appreciate CHAFA and Colorado Division of Housing, who have been really great partners in getting the Colorado Preservation Academy going and keeping up with that. And of course, our local USDA office. So, hi Joe, good to see you. Okay. So we will move forward. Okay, great. I wanted to make sure I was not sharing my screen. So our first presenter is going to be Joe Rowan. Joe is the Director of Commercial Lending at the Impact Development Fund, Funding Partners, and a senior loan, he joined, oh, let me see, Joe. Let me see how sorry about this. Joe was the DED of Funding Partners. That's what he was working on when I met him. And under Joe's leadership, Funding Partners expanded its geographic reach to include the entire state of Colorado, growing technical assistance services and specialized products to address the needs of those within Colorado market, specifically working on affordable housing and other community-based projects. Joe successfully transformed Funding Partners into a sophisticated financial institution without losing its appeal as a revolving loan fund. So Joe and I had met several years ago now, Joe, I feel like in the CDFI space, and I'm really excited to have him here today to talk to you, for those of you who might not know him yet, and to learn more about IDF and their loan program. So Joe, take it away.
Thank you, Robin. For those of you who don't know me, I'm sorry to introduce myself to you because unfortunately I tend to get on people's nerves after a while. But at any rate, I appreciate your kind introduction, Robin. And for those of you who do know me, sorry, but you're going to have to listen to me for the next 15-20 minutes, I think is what is scheduled. But hopefully, this actually won't be much of a presentation. I'm really kind of hoping that it'll be more of an opportunity to stimulate some conversations so we can talk about specific projects or opportunities that some of you are reviewing. And just to give you a quick overview of who IDF is, we have 2 types of financing that we do. We do consumer lending, direct to consumer, and we also do commercial lending, which is more in line with the nature of this seminar. But just to give you an idea, we do have programs that may also cater to the clientele that you are working with through down payment assistance. We do manufactured home financing, rehabilitation. We also do third-party administration, which probably is where most of you are become familiar with us. But then on the commercial side, we do both residential and mixed use and nonprofit facilities. So we'll focus really on the residential side with rental and for sale housing. So this is the creation, rehabilitation, acquisition of those types of properties. And our service area covers the entire state of Colorado. So we're not limited to just the fringe. We do actually enjoy going out into the rural parts of the state. So again, that'll hopefully lead to some conversations about some opportunities that you have there. Next slide, if you wouldn't mind, Robin. So under our commercial loan program, unlike what you are probably used to, and I think this maybe extends to my other panelists that are CDFIs, we don't necessarily limit ourselves to 60% AMI when we're talking about rental properties. Certainly for home ownership properties, especially on the western slope, really need to get up into the higher AMI. So we actually have the ability to go up to 120%, simply because most of our financing does not come from governmental programs. Primarily it comes from banks with some additional governmental investment. But because of our status as CDFI, we actually have some latitude. So we use the low moderate income definition that HUD uses, which does include 120%. And so that's in keeping with our requirements under the Treasury Department, under which CDFIs are certified. Our borrowers can be nonprofit organizations, for-profit entities, and also quasi-governmental, so primarily housing authorities, but it could be other types of again, government-sponsored enterprises or other governmental entities. We don't necessarily lend directly to governments, and mostly that has to do with Tabor issues and the types of financing that we can provide. But we have worked with local governments who have set up subsidiary entities, essentially, that we do provide financing to. As mentioned, we do both rental and for sale product, as well as land trust, which again, I think is something that we'll start to see much more of. Certainly, there's some active land trusts in the state, and so we've worked with them in the past. And as far as our commercial loan programs, we try to get a turnaround from the time that we start discussing a potential project to the time that we actually can issue an approval and start to move towards the closing sequence. I put up there 4 to 6 week turnaround, and a lot of that is driven really by the complexity of the project, but then also, you know, how prepared the applicant entity is to moving forward. So we do spend a lot of time, and I think, again, I'll speak for my colleagues here with CDFIs. We do spend a lot of time just discussing the parameters of a project and what can happen, what we can provide, and what others may be better positioned to provide. So trying to connect you with the right partners and other expertise that will help you succeed in the proposal. And so it's not unusual that we may be in discussions with somebody for a year or more before they're actually ready to submit an application. So when I talk about turnaround, I'm talking from the time that an application is actually submitted and we're starting to collect those documents. So we do try to turn those around fairly quickly. Appraisals typically not required, again, owing to the type of financing that we typically provide. We're not necessarily, and we'll talk about this on the next screen, but we're not necessarily a long-term lender, a long-term solution. We're more of a gap or bridge to get the project to a point where it is ready for takeout through a long-term source. And so we don't really like to add additional cost and time to that process. So a lot of times we can get comfortable doing the financing without that appraisal. We don't engage legal counsel to prepare our documents or review the files itself. So that helps cut down on some of the costs associated with the financing. We typically are providing fixed interest rates, so it's not variable. It gives you a much more certainty as to what those costs are in the ongoing debt service. And then we also really try to structure our payment plans based on what the capacity of the project is to support it. So to give you an example, oftentimes we're called on to provide pre-development financing, where you're trying to complete your due diligence requirements in order to go to construction phase. And in that interim period, we're not going to require that you make payments on the debt. It'll just accrue onto the loan, and you'll pay it in lump sum at the close of construction, for instance, with a pre-development. In other cases, you may be doing modifications to a property and have to take some units offline. In the interim, obviously, that means you're not collecting income from those units. So we can defer payments in that case. It looks more like a construction loan. For those of you familiar with doing a construction financing, you don't make payments during that phase. You essentially pay it at the time of maturity or at some other event in the future. So we do try to be very flexible with those payments to, again, make it comfortable for your organization and for the property itself, actually, to support the project. And so that, if we can look at the term sheet, which I believe is the next screen. So this is just kind of our basic term sheet. And on the left-hand side, you can see the types of financing that we categorize as pre-development, acquisition, construction, mini-perm. So pre-development loans, again, typically are where you're engaging architects, engineers. You maybe need to do environmental review of a property. Or it may be just doing the feasibility analysis, doing a market study, for instance. So those loans can be up to $750,000 and unsecured, typically, go out 36 months. Most often, though, pre-development financing is 12 months or less. But again, it just depends on the complexity of the project. Acquisition or bridge financing, I'll actually cover bridge in just a little bit, but acquisition is, again, should be fairly straightforward. You've identified a multifamily property and you want to acquire it, secure the property site, and then start working on your long-term financing structure, maybe involving tax credits, maybe involving a 538. But in the meantime, you've got a willing seller and you want to act quickly. So this is a way to really get through that process so that you can start to do more of your long-term strategic planning for the project. Construction loans, again, fairly straightforward. It could be either a new build from a virgin site, or it may actually be a gut rehab, or as much as a gut rehab, or it could even be in case with Mr. Cordova, who I see is on the call. Where you actually take a property pretty much down to the foundation. And so that construction really entails both rehab and new construction. Bridge loans, that would be a situation where perhaps you've got a property that you're looking to sell, and you've got another property you're looking to buy, and you just need to kind of bridge that difference. Or in most cases, it actually is where you've received for instance, a grant from the Division of Housing. And as we all know, they're a little bit backed up in terms of their capacities. And so oftentimes that process can take a little while from the time that you get an award approved by the State Housing Board and the time that you actually close on that contract and receive the funds. We do a fair amount of bridge financing for those types of situations. We've also had others where they're actually in the process of fundraising. So they haven't actually identified what that takeout source is, but they're in the process of doing either a capital campaign or, again, going to multiple sources, or maybe even going through multiple rounds of a government program for grant funding, and you just need to bridge that difference. And so that's where our financing can come into play there. And again, you can see the loan amounts, the terms, etc. Mini-perm loans is something that we do. We don't do a lot of this, but we certainly in rural areas, this becomes an alternative, if you will, to going to large banks, going FHA, or bond financing, where you really need a larger project than maybe you're envisioning. So say, for instance, a 20 unit property, you may have a local bank that is willing to provide financing, but they're only willing to offer that for 5 years, which is fairly typical for a community bank. In this case, we can go up to 18 years, which is the maturity date, but then the amortization period can be up to 30. So in that case, you have a balloon at 18 years, but that may be preferable than what the local bank is offering. Even if they may be offering a slightly better rate, that 5 years may give you some discomfort as to what the rates might be down the road. So again, this might be an alternative to what you're seeing from the local community lenders. And I think, Robin, that was it for what I had for slides, other than my contact information. So with that, maybe if you want to move to questions, or if you want to wait until all the presentations are made before we go that.
Yeah, no, I think what we're going to do, Joe, is to introduce Josh. And so you two will be the CDFI folks, and then we'll do some Q&A after both of you speak. And then we will have a break, and then we'll talk about some like a little bit less traditional sort of, and CDFI is not even traditional in the first place, but a little bit more outside of the box with the work that Energy Outreach Colorado has been doing in the rehab space, and also Sharing Connexion, what they're doing with acquisition work as well. And hopefully we'll create some synergies between our presenters even in addition to that. So I will introduce Josh. Josh Griff is a senior loan officer with Enterprise Community Loan Fund. So he's one of my partners in the Denver office of Enterprise. The Enterprise Community Loan Fund is the CDFI for Enterprise Community Partners. And I'm sorry, and I was remiss in telling y'all, not all of you might know what CDFI stands for. That stands for Community Development Financial Institution, which is a certification from the US Treasury. Okay, so anyway, prior to joining the loan fund at Enterprise, Josh spent 7 years underwriting loans for RCAC, or the Rural Community Assistance Corporation. And RCAC is a Sacramento-based CDFI that provides a wide range of financial resources for rural community development projects in the Western US, including affordable housing, environmental infrastructure, community facilities, and small business loans. Josh is based in Colorado with RCAC and covered the Mountain West. I met Josh when he was working at RCAC, and I'm glad to get to be his colleague now at Enterprise. Prior to joining RCAC, Josh was a loan associate with the Low Income Investment Fund in San Francisco, and he is a native Coloradoan, and hails from Grand Junction. So shout out to those of you on the Western Slope. Josh knows that area very well. So take it away, Josh.
All right, thank you. So again, I'm Josh Griff. I'm a senior loan officer with Enterprise Community Loan Fund, and we're the CDFI affiliated with Enterprise Community Partners. We're a national CDFI. We offer financing to support the acquisition, development, and preservation of affordable housing throughout the country. We also provide financing for community facility projects, and we're primarily focused on federally qualified health centers or grocery stores that offer fresh food options in food deserts. But we also do provide some financing for solar development projects around the country when the solar is benefiting affordable housing properties and or its residents. Next slide. So here's just some general information about our loan fund. We currently have total assets under management of about 400 million and about 217 million in loans outstanding. We've closed about 2,200 loans since 1983 when ECLF was founded, and closed over $2 billion in loans to date. Here in Colorado, we've closed over $19 million in loans in the state over the past 3 years. So some good production here in Colorado. Next slide. So this is going to be very similar to what you just heard from Joe. A look at our loan products. We're primarily a short-term, early-stage lender. The bulk of our activity is acquisition lending or pre-development lending. We do quite a bit of equity bridge loans in low-income housing tax credit and historic tax credit projects. We also provide some mini permanent and permanent financing, as well as new market tax credit leveraged loans. We are typically a first position lien holder on a project. But we can do some unsecured pre-development lending. We have a limited bucket of funds that we can use for unsecured lending, and we're currently at capacity with our unsecured loans, but as loans repay, which they do quite often, we can then make those dollars available for new loans. We're making loans similar to what you heard from Joe to nonprofit housing developers, mission-aligned for-profits, and municipal agencies like housing authorities or tribally designated housing entities. And our borrowers always have a strong track record of affordable housing development and management. So while much of our lending activity in Colorado has been in the Denver metro area, we can make any of these loan types in rural parts of the state. Next slide. So for this group, I wanted to focus on, this group is focused on preservation of affordable housing in rural Colorado. And so ECLF has received several Capital Magnet Fund awards through the CDFI fund over the past several years. So the Capital Magnet Fund is a competitive grant program. It's administered by the Department of Treasury. Awards go to CDFIs and nonprofit housing organizations, like CHAFA has an award. And we're using these funds to develop, preserve, and rehabilitate affordable housing. So Capital Magnet Fund recipients are required to attract at least $10 of outside capital for each dollar that we're awarded in Capital Magnet funds from the Treasury Department. So what that means for us is that when we fund a loan through this program, a portion of the loan is funded with the Capital Magnet Fund grant, and then the remaining portion of the loan comes from our regular program capital, which is investments from banks and health institutions, as you heard from Joe. So Enterprise Community Loan Fund is using our Capital Magnet Funds awards to support multifamily rental housing development and preservation efforts in designated states. Colorado is an eligible state for us to use these funds. So we can use the Capital Magnet Funds with most of our standard loan products, primarily pre-development or acquisition, equity bridge financing, some mini-perm loans, and we're looking to use these funds in both urban and rural projects here in Colorado. So use of the Capital Magnet Fund in a loan provides us the ability to be more aggressive with our lending terms, so we can do higher loan to value or lower interest rate financing than we could offer through our traditional lending programs. But because we're using federal dollars in these loans, there are some additional requirements related to this program, and it's primarily around unit affordability. So in exchange for the higher loan to value or the lower interest rate financing, an affordability restriction will need to be recorded on the property, which in our case requires that at least 50% of the units in the property need to be affordable to tenants at 50% or less of area median income. So the Capital Magnet Fund affordability restriction is typically recorded at closing of our loan and will remain on the property for a 10-year period. And so that means that the restriction in most cases will remain on the property even after our short-term bridge loan is repaid. So the borrower will need to continue providing us with an annual certification that the property meets the affordability requirements of this program during that 10-year affordability period. If there are already more restrictive covenants on the property, the Capital Magnet Fund restriction can be subordinated to those more restrictive covenants. Our obligation to the Treasury Department, the CDFI fund, also requires us to hit a certain number of units developed or preserved, and again, to fund deeply affordable projects. So we are really looking for projects that get us towards that goal. So the more units in the project, the more deeply affordable the project is, the more aggressive we're going to be with our loan terms to try to get these dollars into your project. So projects funded with Capital Magnet Fund also need to meet specific construction completion deadlines, and it depends on the contract award year that we're using for in making that loan. So preservation of existing affordable units is really a good fit for the Capital Magnet Fund program, because these are projects that they're already constructed, they're leased up, they've got affordability requirements in place. So our Capital Magnet Fund restriction, doesn't affect your underwriting, and then, so you can meet the Capital Magnet Fund restriction at the time of closing on these you know, an acquisition of an existing affordable property. So if you've got a rural preservation project and a shorter term financing need that you think would be a good fit for our Capital Magnet Fund program, I'd love to talk to you about it. We'll take a closer look at the specifics of the project, what the financing need is, and then the proposed repayment scenario for the loan. Next slide. And so here's my contact information, and I do hope to hear from you. If it turns out that after we've reviewed it, it's not a good fit for our program, you know, we work very closely with Joe's group, Impact Development Fund, Mercy Community Capital. We're regularly referring projects to one another. So if it's not a fit for our program, we will certainly try to refer it to one of our partner CDFIs here in the state.
Thanks, Josh. And we will be sending out all the slides after, so you'll be able to make sure you have all the info that comes on those slides. I want to ask and make sure that everybody who has questions for Josh or Joe can submit them through chat or through the Q&A. But since I don't have, oh, look, Beth sent me a question right now. Have either of the CDFIs, this is from Beth Truby at Chaffa, have either of the CDFIs done any loans on tribal lands in Colorado?
No, we have not. We've done them on the periphery, but not actually on tribal land.
And we have in South Dakota, but not in Colorado.
Okay, great. And did you have challenges, or did that work? How did that work? Or would you look at, you're continuing to look at tribal land programs, right?
Certainly. I mean, it's always a challenge. There's no doubt, because you can't typically record, you know, a lien on a property. So it does present some challenges, but we do have products and interested in making investments in tribal communities. Great,
thanks. Because I know that has been an issue just because of the land ownership structure is really different in tribal lands than it is on non-tribal lands. Dawn from the San Luis Valley Housing Coalition wants to hear more from Joe on mobile home purchase refinance options. And how can a nonprofit apply for those funds and then work with the low-income households and need that funding? Like, what is the process of engaging the community members as part of that model?
Terrific. Yeah, so, and I'll apologize if I use the term mobile home, and that is in keeping with our nomenclature of the day, but because they aren't mobile. But at any rate, so yeah, we have a manufactured product that is geared to both the owner of that home, so financing the purchase of it, but then we also work with entities that are acquiring entire parks or creating a new park. So we've got some experience there. So it can work a couple of different ways. So actually, right now, what a consumer can do is go right to our website and actually apply for the acquisition or rehabilitation of their home. But if you are an agency that is looking to, either you own a park and you're looking to rehab it, or you are working with residents that want to purchase their park, I'll mention Thistle Housing out of Boulder, which is an affiliate of Rock USA, which is a national organization that really is, their entire focus is on resident owner community acquisition of existing parks. So again, if you've got a group of residents that are interested in acquiring, then I would actually, the first referral I would make is to Andy Cadlick at Thistle Community Housing, who would work directly with the residents in your organization to organize the residents and really go through that whole process of creating a co-op. So it is actually a new legal entity that the residents would engage and take self-governance, take over self-governance of the property and actually become the borrowing entity for financing to purchase from the existing owner. And as part of that process, it can entail rehabilitation of the park itself. typically it does not entail the rehabilitation of individual homes, because that is really the responsibility of each homeowner. So again, we try to fill that gap in by providing the financing directly to the owners themselves, as well as to the park or the park owner. And we've actually done financing for a private individual who acquired a park and then agreed to hold rents, lot rents, to a certain level, so that it again maintained affordability. Worked extremely well, and something that we would certainly entertain going forward.
Great. There's a lot of that work that's really needed throughout the state. So I'm glad to hear that there's several like successful projects going forward in that space, because it is a really unique need for preservation that can be really challenging. I agree, Joe, that the ROC model the co-op model is a really great model to pursue in that respect, because it also continues to keep some of that equity in for there's some nice aspects of that to make sure that each of the owners continues to have ownership of their unit. It's not really mobile, as you mentioned.
Yeah, it's a great empowerment tool too. I mean, because now folks feel like they have some not only some skin in the game, but then also they have some self-determination. So they really do become much more engaged at a community level, is what we've seen. So it's not just within their park; they're actually more engaged with the community itself.
Right. I think it's a great model, and I'm hoping to have some more conversations about that. I know that there's some really good work being done in that space. So, okay, I've got a few things coming up. One question coming from Joshua Emerson is, do you think there will ever be a CHAFA LIHTC project on tribal land? I don't know if we're the right ones to answer that question, but if you want to take a stab at it.
No, I'll pass.
Okay, we're going to pass on that question. I think it does really matter what group is working on it and what project they're pursuing. We do have, as Josh mentioned at Enterprise, we do have some targeted, on the syndication side, some targeted products for tribal designated projects. So that's something to keep in mind. And I had heard that there is a Mountain Ute project being considered right now. So we'll see. And once we have a model, then we'll talk about it, and that'll be lovely. Beth Truby asks, how do you handle the no lien thing?
So I think, Josh, that's probably geared towards you in terms of how you secure financing where you can't take a lien on if it is on tribal land.
Yeah, we basically would be considering it an unsecured loan, and so in that case, we're going to be really looking at the borrower's financial capacity and ability, the project's ability to get to loan repayment. So that's how we've handled it in the past. I think the loan that we did make in South Dakota it's considered an unsecured loan, and we're collateralized by some future grant awards that the organization is expecting. So it's an unusual structure, but there's ways to work around it.
Great. Steve Cordova asked, or it's a comment, and then we'll get to the question. Yesterday, I toured the Indie Dwell factory in Pueblo. Are there any lending restrictions on building options or methods? So Indie Dwell is a new modular. Yeah, okay, good. Head nodding is amazing. And then container homes are a bit different than stick-built and not yet a common commodity. And so is there challenges, or do you foresee challenges in financing that type of development?
I don't know, Josh, you want to?
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, I know that we're actually looking at a deal with a group that is going to be working with Indie Dwell. I think the challenge, there's not necessarily a restriction, but we're going to really look at whether or not the the city is going to allow for development of this type of product on the site that we're financing. So that's going to be the restriction. The method itself is not necessarily an issue. Just wanting to make sure that the project can be developed as proposed.
So Josh, what I'm hearing is that you're saying it's not the lending that's going to be the challenge. It's like whatever the restrictions are based on manufactured housing
Yes.
in the zoning requirements of that community.
Right.
Okay.
Can you get all your building approvals for a project with this type of development?
Yeah, and I would concur with that. It really is a matter of whether the municipality is going to. It's the same issue with tiny homes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I mean, that's all the rage, but really trying to get the actual permit to put in those projects has been the real stumbling block. Primarily hooking up municipal utilities is where a lot of that comes in, as well as the construction style, meaning that it doesn't meet international residential code. But having said that, since we do finance manufactured homes, which again predate 1976, so the actual trailers in a lot of cases is what we're financing. So those don't meet residential code either, but they are placed on a site and they have an existing use. So we don't really have an issue. But when you start to get into new construction like IndieDwell and others, there's another group that's actually starting a manufacturing facility in outside of Buena Vista. But those will be more kind of modular type construction. But at any rate, those all fit within our parameters. So it's just a matter of whether or not the local municipality or the local government will allow the permitting of those units.
Great. Yeah. I know that when we were trying to do some modular construction, sometimes we would face different zoning requirements or different land requirements than even a stick-built construction would face, like different landscaping requirements, different size of lot, and they ask for bigger lots, so then it could make things actually more expensive to use a modular product. So those are things to look at. It's also things I think that we need to talk about advocacy on the local level and really kind of highlighting the need and the reason for going in a modular route and why that can be successful and why it doesn't require to be hidden on many acres of land with, a certain amount of bushes or trees in front of it. So
one thing I'll just, if I may, Robin, just throw in one other thing.
Yeah.
So when we talk about modular construction, one of the hiccups that often happens, especially if you're using traditional financing, is that the manufacturer wants to be paid when it leaves the door. Mm-hmm. But your traditional lenders aren't going to finance it until it is set and again ready for CO. So that's something where CDFIs also serve a valuable purpose, is that we can essentially finance that transit phase.
Yeah, that's a huge point, Joe, because you're not selling it to the actual homeowner until after it's set, and you have to do all these other things, but you have to pay when it leaves the manufacturer, like in Pueblo, for example, and then you have to wait till it gets to the valley or wherever you're going, get all the things set before you buy it. So there's that chunk of money that's needed. So you're saying you have products that are geared to help organizations cover that.
Exactly. Yep.
Awesome. Yes. And then Dawn has a question related to existing. You guys are getting a lot of questions about manufactured. So existed manufactured property on private land that might need repair or replacement due to condition. Do you have any products that might support that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So again, going back to our example in Buena Vista, it is a private owner of the land, and also needed some financing and as we probably all recognize, I mean, most parks were built 30, 40, 50 or more years ago, and it's not unusual to see garden hoses used as a water supply that maybe only put 6 feet underground, or in some cases it's just laid on top. So those types of improvements certainly are part of the project budget that can be financed, and it doesn't necessarily matter to us that it is a private owner of the park, as long as that private owner is willing to institute some policies around the lot rent and how those are, the term of the lease, when escalations can be made into how much. Those are things that we will negotiate individually and put inside of our loan documents. It doesn't extend beyond the term of our financing, however. So that's something to definitely keep in mind, especially when you're talking about private owners. It's not like we're putting a LURA on the property as you would with say a tax credit or with state funding, unless those sources are brought in at some point, which again is an eligible use under CDOH. You can do both rehab and acquisition of manufactured home parks.
Yeah, and I know they have done some of that in the last couple of years. I think that part of the question might be based on there's manufactured housing that is placed in throughout rural Colorado that's not part of a community, right? So how does an individual, but the challenge is if they're older, it's very hard to refi. For example, like USDA might allow for a 502 when it's originally placed, but then if it needs to sell, that's where the challenge comes. Is there a product that you know of that might work for that?
Yeah, so we do see a lot of that. And again, where somebody has 35 acres and they put a mobile home on it simply because the county will allow it. That type of financing is really challenging, especially, including us, but especially for most lenders, is that it does make it very difficult, I think, in some cases to underwrite that type of financing. Because we do operate out of one location, it's kind of hard for us to keep tabs on a property that's located in Ohio City, in Gunnison County, up on the hill somewhere. So that type of financing is pretty challenging for us even. So we do prefer that it be within an actual designated park as opposed to just being on acreage somewhere. So that is still a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just because, like you said, as things have grown up over time, and not all counties and not all incorporated areas have the same rules, but manufactured might have been the easiest way in order to get a home there. I think we do see a lot of aging manufactured stock that's sort of independently owned, and always looking for ways to think about how to help those folks to sell or to have that access to that wealth building tool that is home ownership, which is what was the intention of it when they originally, to continue to drive that forward and figuring out ways to do that so that they can either divest or improve their property. So Don, I think that gets at your question. And any other questions for about that? Okay, great. Don said we answered it. Josh, I do have one more question about the Capital Magnet Fund. Do you have a time limit on when you're trying to deploy that money, or how that's working? Yeah,
so like I said, we have multiple awards of the Capital Magnet Fund. So we are trying to get out our initial Capital Magnet Fund Award, the 2016 award. We need to get those dollars out by, I believe, early next year. And then, we've got subsequent Capital Magnet Fund awards that provide us significantly more time. So we'll have a few more years to get those dollars out. And we can kind of place this, depending on where the project is and it's in the process. If it's an existing preservation project, we would love to get it into that 2016 award because it can meet the requirements at the time that we close on the loan. If it's something that's going to take longer, like a new construction project, it's going to need to go into one of our later award years to meet the timing requirements of the program.
So it can be deployed in the right amount of time I get it.
Yeah.
So like if it's going in for 4% right now, it might not have been awarded, but if it does get awarded, this could be an option for a project like that. Is that kind of what I'm?
Yes, yeah, we could consider that for our I think it's our 2018 award where Colorado is an eligible state.
Okay. And have you ever worked on putting a loan in like a portfolio acquisition?
We have not through the Capital Magnet Fund. We've done some portfolio acquisitions in Washington State with Mercy Housing Northwest.
Great, and that was probably rural. That was rural, right? I think we talked about
Yes,
this at some point. Okay,
yeah.
Great. Yeah, I just know that there's some groups looking at portfolio acquisition preservation right now. So I was just curious if that might be a good fit. Okay, well, that was a good discussion. Thank you all for the questions. Thanks for being flexible with your ability to answer them. And taking a stab maybe at questions that are beyond our scope, but that we might have interest in. And we will be sharing your information with everybody on the call. So that way, if they have questions, folks can reach out to you both directly. So if we don't have any more questions right now, we're going to take a little break. We're going to break, it's 10:51 according to my computer clock. I think that's accurate. We are going to take a break right now and we'll come back. I'm going to give you guys a long break. You get to come back at 11. So we will see you then. And thank you again to Josh and Joe for, I'm always excited to get to see you, even if it's virtually, and I never get sick of you, Joe. And so I'm excited that we get to continue to work together in this space and think about how to further community development and affordable housing through financing. So thanks for being here and taking part in this panel.
You're far too kind.
Okay, we're on break till 11, guys. Thanks. I'm back. It is 11 o'clock, and so we're going to get started. I see Max, who is our next presenter. So we are on point to get going. I will introduce Max. Max Kaye has been with Energy Outreach Colorado, also called, I don't know, I always call them EOC, since 2016, where he's currently the multifamily program director. Max has helped over 200 multifamily affordable housing properties in Colorado lower their energy bills through energy efficiency projects. Prior to his time at Energy Outreach Colorado, Max worked in multifamily construction in Texas and residential energy efficiency in Massachusetts. Those are very different states, Max. Welcome, and I got the chance to work with Energy Outreach Colorado on a project in Del Norte when I was the deputy director at CRHDC, and was really impressed and excited about what they had to offer rural properties and rural programming. So I'm excited to have Max talk to you today about what they can do in the space of rehab, particularly for projects that we want to preserve or rehabilitate.
Thanks, Robin. Let's go to the next slide. So I'll do a quick overview of Energy Outreach Colorado, because multifamily rehab or multifamily existing buildings is just one small component of what we do. It's definitely the one that's applicable to this session, but at the same time, everything we do is community support services, and if the community doesn't know about them, what good are they? You see our mission here. Basically, we're here to support low-income Coloradans with their energy needs. Next slide, please. So, like I said, we have a kind of portfolio of programs that starts with individual utility bill payment assistance, emergency furnace replacement, which is our crisis intervention program. And then we think about this as kind of a holistic approach, with that being the crisis mode and moving towards energy efficiency in both single family, multifamily, and nonprofit facilities that we hope is the vehicle to help stabilize utility bills. So it's a little bit harder to fall into that hole. And then we also have a strong advocacy portion of what we do, and are also working towards building a renewable subscription program with a community solar garden, which is going to be a really interesting way to kind of support rural properties in the future, with just like a solar subscription that's got a bill payment credit. And the threshold there would be like an 80% AMI threshold for participation, so long as there's availability and the neighboring counties. So that's one that I'd love to chat about with anybody who's interested at a later time. Next slide, please. So what I focus on and what we're talking about today is multifamily energy efficiency. And sort of this first slide here is just, why energy efficiency? And some of the high level highlights for what energy efficiency can do for your properties and why it's important. What we know that's obvious is lower utility bills. It's an interesting dynamic with a lot of our low income properties because often the metering structures are very strange for how it's divvied up with properties usually always paying water bills. Sometimes they'll pay gas bills. Sometimes the tenants will pay electric bills. And so depending on the layout of the property and the type of measures, it's a great way for both the property to save money, but also to reduce the tenant's energy consumption as well. The green benefits, lowering CO2 emissions, a big one, especially for, some of the properties that might have not gotten a lot of TLC recently, is indoor air quality. Looking at ventilation in the building, looking at any sort of CO, carbon monoxide hazards, and addressing those as part of the work that we do. Improved comfort for tenants. And then, one that I'd especially like to highlight for this group is just offsetting scheduled maintenance and capital expenses. So do you have an old boiler that you're going to have to replace? Well, maybe we can take a look at it as part of our energy efficiency programs, and we can help offset that cost while getting high efficiency equipment in the building. Next slide. Oh, when you'll see here, I got some Manzanola and Meeker, two properties that we worked on that would definitely qualify as rural Colorado. Thanks. There we go. So here's where I'm going to confuse you. I'll try not to, but we have two multifamily programs here at Energy Outreach Colorado. One is a utility sponsored program, and the other is the federally sponsored weatherization assistance program. I'm going to touch on the utility sponsored program, but really focus the rest of the talk on the weatherization assistance program. The highlights that I want to talk about for the utility program are, that there's a lot of flexibility in how we approach this program. And so while we might not be able to do as much work in terms of dollar value towards improving the property, we can do one-off lighting retrofits, one-off boiler replacements. We can go to the same property year after year and dip into a pool of utility funding that's set aside especially for low-income affordable properties. So the utilities are mandated to participate in these energy efficiency programs, and there is a special carve out just for affordable housing that is designed to be a much larger payout than the equivalent market rate. So the qualifications for that program are 80% AMI, so 2/3 of the property needs to be at 80% AMI or less. And the participating utilities are, the major regulated utilities in the state: Excel Electric and Gas, Black Hills Electric and Gas, Atmos Gas, Platte River Power Authority, and also some Colorado natural gas as well, which I know we see in the rural areas of the state. So there are, once we get into the rural areas of the states, we do see a lot of rural electric co-ops that don't participate in these programs because they're not mandated to do so. So it's unfortunate that we can't necessarily reach those communities. But there are, you'll see Black Hills Gas kind of all over rural areas of the state, and Black Hills Electric down kind of in Pueblo, Canyon City. So there are some good kind of overlaps there. So if any of your properties are served by those utilities, it's worth kind of reaching out and kind of discussing those programs. I'll switch over to the weatherization assistance program, which is the case study that we're going to highlight with the CRHDC property that we did last year. Qualifications: 67% of the property has to be at 200% of federal poverty level or less, and the property must be centrally heated. Beyond that, those are really the two main qualifications. After that, if there is energy efficiency work to be done, we can probably take a look at it. It's a statewide program. There is an application, and I want to stress this because what this program kind of does a much deeper dive, as we're going to see, into energy efficiency rehab. and we spend a lot more money per building with this program. And because of that, there's an application process, and we are only kind of taking on between 5 and 7 projects a year. So if you are interested in this program, we do have one more spot available for 2021 that we're actively seeking applicants for. So seed planted. Next slide, please. So this is La Hacienda. It's a community resource and housing development corporation property in Del Norte. Some kind of highlights and statistics about just the property background. Senior disabled community, 2 residential buildings and an outbuilding with a maintenance shop. Total of 24 units, 15,000 square feet. And these annual utility costs were prior to us coming in and doing some efficiency work. Next slide, please. So one of the nice features of this program is we do a really extensive study in terms of a DOE2 energy audit on your building. And that report is useful beyond our scope of work often in terms of just analyzing how your building is performing and where your dollars are going in terms of your utility bills. That audit looks at a variety of various measures, and I've listed them all out here. A couple ones to highlight is very recently the program has started to look at solar, which is an exciting opportunity that we were actually able to do our first one at a CRHDC property in Del Norte, not this one, but a neighboring one. And then the rest of it is pretty typical energy efficiency scope of work. I've got down here a note: windows, rarely cost effective. We analyze them, we almost never do them. I know that's a popular one. And I've thrown in a picture of just your classic ugly boiler that we replaced last year. I'm sure you guys have a couple of these hiding out in your basement somewhere. Next slide, please. So these are some of the improvements that we did at La Hacienda. We did an extensive exterior common area and in-unit lighting retrofit. That includes new fixtures where it makes sense, full gut retrofits. So you'll see here, we've got those classic old linear fluorescents. We took out the ballasts that constantly fail on us. We put in new driver, new LED tubes, and estimated first year saving for all the lighting work that we did was $2,200, which, if you remember the previous slide for what the annual overall electric bill is, this is a substantial portion of just the electric bill. Next slide, please. And here is the picture. These are the pictures that I could pretty much look at all the time in my job. And if I could do a PowerPoint presentation just of old to new boilers, it would make me very happy. We've got one of the boiler plants at La Hacienda on the left side of your screen, original 1984. So when we look at boiler plants, and you guys have seen in your PNCAs that, or PCNAs that most of the time we're expecting a useful lifespan of boiler plants to be about 20 to 25 years. So these ones were coming up anyway, regardless of how energy inefficient they were. So this was a good opportunity to take advantage of the timing of just a capital needs upgrade. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the new Lochinvar boilers that we were able to pay for and put in. Estimated first year saving on the gas side, about $2,000. So next slide, please. And this is kind of the whole project by the numbers. It looks a little bit condensed, but you'll see on the left-hand side kind of the quantity of measures we were able to do. What's great about this weatherization assistance program is that they are looking at the building as a whole. And that includes, you'll see a bunch of baseboard repair, a bunch of zone valve repair. These are expenses that are kind of these constant headaches that we rarely have the money to pay for. And in particular, energy efficiency programs, like on the utility sponsored side, they don't really want to be contributing dollars towards measures like that. And the other exciting one with this program, going back to the health and safety and indoor air quality, is we were able to replace 24 in-unit bath fans. So every unit that had a exhausting bath fan got replaced with an Energy Star bath fan to kind of reduce mold and mildew mitigation in those buildings. Because as you guys are familiar with property management of these, like almost all the time, there's a significant portion of bath fans that don't operate correctly, or the residents don't use them because when you turn them on, there's a nasty kind of squeaking noise that comes out of them that causes a lot of headaches. And on the right-hand side here are the dollars, which hopefully what you're most interested in. This grant was 175 grand, and there are often owner contributions for these projects, but they're typically pretty small. So they're typically 20% or less of the project cost. In this case, the grant covered 100% of the project cost. So we were basically able to go in, identify $175,000 worth of cost-effective energy efficiency measures, reduce the energy bills by a total of 32%, and year after year, and that return on investment's immediate for this particular property. So in terms of value, like this example can't really be beat. Like I said, there are examples where we might have an owner contribution portion, but that's kind of out there up front, and we can talk about it and work with the property based on their capital reserves. And then the other, I was mentioning that we did a WAP solar project for the first time last year, and that is the rooftop you see in the bottom right-hand corner at Casas, also in Del Norte. Really exciting that we were able to kind of take that next step to renewables, which is like I mentioned at the beginning, part of our vision for how we're going to approach affordable housing as a whole. Next slide, please. And so that's going to wrap the weatherization assistance program. We're happy to kind of take questions. I think I already saw one in the chat. But I also just wanted to recap that utility rebate program. A lot less restrictions on kind of what we can do in the building, but just a lot of flexibility. And this is a great one to keep in mind if you're already doing a scheduled rehab, particularly like, let's say it's a LIHTC rehab and you have to comply with Enterprise Green Communities 2020. A lot of those standards that Enterprise Green Communities is asking for are eligible for these low-income utility rebates. So rather than us coming in and running a project, we might be able to just take the information that you're already planning on working with your current contractor and run it over to the utility and see what kind of money we can just layer onto the project. So that is a great option as well. And another cool note about like these sorts of programs is when you work with Energy Outreach Colorado, we don't charge anything because we're not just a nonprofit, but also we get paid by the utilities to run these programs. Everyone who's a participant in these utility districts, they pay into these programs as part of their bill. So the residents pay into the programs, the house meters pay into the programs. So think of Energy Outreach Colorado as kind of your avenue or to take that money back out to the programs and put it into your property. And that's it. Next slide, please. Here's my contact information. So if anyone wants to discuss further or specifically about the last slot that we have for the 2021 WAP pipeline, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to take kind of any question at all. So thank you.
Yeah, Max, it looks like there's a few questions for you in the chat that have come through. Steve, I'm going to go on and allow you to talk so you can ask your question since it's multi-part, and I already did my shot at speaking in your voice earlier today, so I'll give you a chance to talk.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Hey, good information. I really appreciate it. Max, I have a quick question. It wasn't quite clear to me. Is the multifamily utility rebate program a rehab program? That's the first part of the question.
Quick answer, yes. All of our multifamily programs are for existing buildings only.
All right, great. And secondly, some of the things that we're sometimes running into is that number of units per building. So for example, we may have 4 units per building that make up 20 units in 5 buildings, or we may have duplexes that make up a total of 10 units, but because it's not 5 or more, they don't qualify for certain programs. Is there a minimum number of units per building required?
Not per building. My one caveat will be that some of these dispersed portfolios where you might have 5 or 10 duplexes scattered around the city that make up one kind of property as like tax credits are concerned. Those become really tricky for us. Part of it's just the logistics, not actually the qualifying the property. So I'll put those in their own category. But beyond that, no, if the property as a whole is made up of 4 or more units, we can look at it with our multifamily programs. And the nice thing at Energy Outreach is we also run single family programs. So if it does look like something that would just logistically be a better fit for the single family program, we'll just kind of slide it that way.
Thank you.
I'm looking at Nicole Holt's question here, which I love to see. Nicole, I would say that this entirely depends on your utility service. So what is your gas provider for utility, and were those energy efficient boilers installed this year? If it is within our utility coverage area, then it is not too late to get rebates. So
Nicole, I'm going to let you talk too, just so that you guys can have a more live conversation on that one.
Thanks, Robin.
And Nicole, you should be able to talk now.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, we have Black Hills.
Oh, yeah. Give me a call. I'll get you some money. See, it's
We're
pretty.
also using you guys already. I'm in touch with the folks in Durango with 4Core. Is it the same program? No.
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. We're working with 4Core for I have 2 companies, so that's for the corporate side, and they're doing energy audits right now. So everything you were saying is very relevant to what we're doing right now. So I would just say to everybody else, it's excellent. They're giving us full reports, audit reports, and then hopefully going to help me figure out how to, because I'm looking at having to replace 52 furnaces, so obviously can't afford that. So hoping to get help with that. But I'm going to keep your contact information. But definitely with these boilers that we just replaced at the elderly, took a lot of my money, obviously. And so that would be cool if I could talk to you a little bit more about that.
Yep, if they meet kind of the utility spec, basically, as long as they're installed and we access the rebate in the same calendar year, that funding is available for you. So
Okay.
that would be, the timing is good. So thank you.
Okay, I'll email you. Thank you.
Great. And that's always fun to have a conversation like that. I do, Nicole, I really encourage you and anybody else who's an owner manager of properties that are, most of the properties we own and manage in rural Colorado are older and are in need of things like new boilers. Like Max said, the boilers at La Hacienda were from 1984. So they weren't just 20 years old, they were 36 years old, you know? So we were really in need of that. And it was amazing to work with Energy Outreach Colorado on that project, and what we were able to get, even if we would have to have matched 20% of what they put in, would have been more than worth it for the way that the project worked. I will say there is a little bit of there's a little bit of paperwork involved, just like anything where we get money. So, and they use different, as Max alluded at the beginning, they use a different poverty standard than what we're typically use as an AMI. I think it's like the federal poverty level. So just, it took a little bit of us understanding those pieces as we got started, and getting all the different utility meter readings was our biggest fun thing to do, but it is more than worth it. And I'm really excited that we got to learn a little bit more. And I do really encourage you to reach out to Max, especially if there's some more availability for that WIP program, because it is well worth pursuing, and really could help the overall effectiveness of the property. And $9,000 in electricity costs and savings are huge when you're thinking about the thin margins we operate in our operating budgets for our rural properties. So thank you so much, Max. And I'm about to turn it over to Emily. Emily, it's good to see you. Emily Nilsen, and I am about to pull up your bio, but I'm having a hard time finding my documents. Here we go. Emily is the Operation Director at Sharing Connexion, and you'll learn a lot about them next. I met Emily as she worked at Housing Colorado as the Membership and Communication Specialist. Emily's been dedicated to excellence in the nonprofit sector and is really well-versed in communication, outreach, and development. She has over 12 years experience, and she just recently completed her master's in public administration from the School of Public Affairs at the University of Colorado, Denver. So congratulations on that, Emily. And with no further ado, I'm really excited to learn a little bit more about what y'all are doing, Sharing Connexion, and sharing that with the folks on the call. So take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Robin. Appreciate this opportunity. And yeah, I think most people are going to learn about it.
Oh, it's Emily, sorry, I muted you instead of me. So could you unmute yourself? I apologize. That is completely my fault.
No worries. I'm going to start from the top.
Yes, please. Sorry about that.
Well, thank you, Robin. Really happy to be here today. It's great to be a part of this group, and I think most people are going to be learning about us for the first time. We are kind of the new kids on the block, so I'm excited to go over this. Sharing Connexion is a 501c3 organization. We are a nonprofit. If I could have the next slide. Great. So our mission is to provide affordable housing organizations and nonprofits with real estate expertise, funding, and preservation. We'll talk a little bit more about our programs and why we are here today as well, namely that preservation piece. This is a group of us, of our board members. We also have gotten a bunch of new board members since this photo. So I encourage you to check out our website. The guy in the jacket there in the first row, his name is Ed Anderson, and he is the founder of Sharing Connexion. And this is our team. So we're pretty much all real estate professionals who are donating their time pro bono. We run a lean, mean ship, and we rely a lot on some of the volunteer work to keep our costs down. Next slide, please. Alrighty, so a little bit more about what we do and how we activate that mission in a practical way. So the first program here is not super relevant to what we're talking about here today, but I'm still just going to go over it so that you all have knowledge. We have a real estate donations program. It is focused towards other nonprofits who are needing to fundraise and need real estate expertise in order to empower them in fundraising. So I know that everyone here on the call would know exactly what to do if your organization was donated real estate. But a lot of other nonprofits have no idea what to do because it just doesn't align with their mission, and it's not what they do. So the good thing about this program towards all of you is that we actually do all of the technical assistance in this program. We end up, after net operating costs, giving 90% towards the nonprofit who the real estate was designated towards. And then 10% of that goes to our restricted capital fund. That restricted capital fund is what funds all of our great affordable housing investments and all of that. So it is a great way to kind of provide technical assistance into the community. So if you know any nonprofits who are struggling with real estate donations, send them our way. We'll be able to help them. And then it also creates a sustainable funding source for more funds for affordable housing. So the other two programs that we do, the second one is real estate impact investing. This is where we're going to talk a little about some gap financing tools. And then the third is real estate rescue, where we have a short-term acquisition solution for preservation of properties. So I'll get more in depth in that in the next few slides. So we'll go to the next slide, please. Great. So real estate impact investing. This is going to be gap financing tools similar to the first two presenters. Our sweet spot is pre-development and bridge loans. We're targeting a 1 to 3 year term. So we're not necessarily coming in to be a long-term partner on the deal. We do have specific focus areas. The first is nonprofits who focus on economic development. And then the second is affordable housing developments, which, is kind of a broad topic, but we do specifically look at those who are in underserved areas. We have a heart for rural Colorado or anything outside of the Front Range, really, although we serve Front Range needs as well. And then we also want to make sure that we're serving underserved populations. So that might mean bumping up the AMI a little bit. That might mean bumping down the AMI from just what is the typical 60 AMI LIHTC development. So yeah, we're kind of looking at different things and making sure that we're meeting mission in that way. Next slide. So here's some examples of the real estate impact program. So the first one is under that category of a nonprofit who is doing economic development. They're called Bud's Warehouse. And so they have a warehouse facility in Aurora, Colorado. Their issue was they were being displaced out of their facility and they needed to procure a new one. So we came alongside them and helped them with their capital stack, provided some technical assistance. And then we also provided the last bit of gap financing that they needed, which was just a bridge loan of the tune of $100,000, so pretty low. And then we were able to increase our term for that reason, so it was a 5-year term. The second one here is an affordable housing development in Gypsum, Colorado, so in Eagle County. This is affordable housing stock for Colorado's mountain communities to the tune of the first half was a LIHTC tax credit development, and then the second half, the phase 2, was 80 to 120 AMI. So our bridge loan just helped them kind of close out phase 1 costs and then going into phase 2 as they're securing construction lending and everything for that second phase 2. So it was a short term, just a 1-year term, but that was a $1.75 million bridge loan. And that is generally an amount that you can think about when you would be thinking about applying to us. Next slide, please. Alrighty, so this is why we're here today more than even the last one. Real estate rescue. So the idea behind real estate rescue was there's a lot of different areas of the state that are facing displacement issues. So the idea was this would be a short-term acquisition solution focused on preservation. So first of all, we do short-term acquisition loans, 3-year term, not a long-term partnership again. But then what makes us unique is really our short-term acquisition ownership solution. This is a project where for non-tax credit affordable housing developments, or for nonprofit facilities, we could come alongside and acquire the land and hold it for 3 years at market value. So there would be a slight interest added, but for the most part, it's just all market value. And then, handling of operating costs, stuff like that. But it creates time for the partnering organization to fundraise or finance a purchase. And this could be for existing facilities. It could be for naturally occurring affordable housing, so land that is at risk of going market rate. So there's a lot of options here in this solution. Next slide. So it's a little bit easier to envision what this project is when I explain the project on a tangible level. So we recently worked with Extended Hands of Hope. They are a nonprofit who helps with transitional housing for girls exiting sex trafficking. So a couple years ago, they were at risk of displacement. Their landlord was planning on selling their facility, and essentially their mission was in jeopardy. There's a lot of reasons based on the population they serve that they had very specific land needs and property needs with safety and remote. But this particular land too was on many acres, and it gave them the ability to expand over time. So they came to us because they were interested in purchasing the facility, but they knew that they weren't going to be able to pull it together in time. And so what we did with them instead was we did this program of real estate rescue. And so we purchased the facility, held it at market value. I'm proud to say that just last month, or I guess 2 months ago now, in July, after a successful fundraising campaign, they had fully fundraised. They have no debt on their property, and they were able to purchase it back from us. So we just closed on that in July. So it was very exciting and kind of proved the need for a transitional partnership like ourselves, who might be able to come in at a time of need. And it's definitely not for every project, but I think for some projects it's really helpful. Next slide, please. So how our funding works. We have a partnership with First Bank. So First Bank is essentially our lending capacity. We do have a capital fund, like I mentioned, where we are driving some dollars through that and to that as well. But because we work hand in hand with First Bank, it helps us to create a competitive loan program. So what you can do is you can expect competitive rates with the other nonprofit lenders in the area. However, I'm not able to necessarily post those rates just because, so we're not like publishing a term sheet necessarily, because the way that it works is we get the First Bank approval and then our approval before we process that loan. But we are able to move fairly quickly through that process. And the rates will vary project to project. So you'll just have to reach out for a quote. Next slide, please. Oh, wow, I moved through that real fast today. So this is my contact information. And then I had mentioned Ed, who's the founder. That's his contact information as well. You can learn more about us at sharingconnexion.org. And I think Robin will start facilitating some questions.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Emily, for giving us some overview of that. I do think that the acquisition kind of conversation that you started with, like extended hands of hope, and that model is really interesting. I wanted to ask you a few specific questions about that. Basically, so if as that nonprofit, how are you able to underwrite the acquisition of the land? Because they didn't have the collateral of the land to start with. So I'm just trying to make sure I understand that process for y'all.
Yeah, so in this case, we did purchase it from the owner who was planning on selling the land. And then we went ahead and we had a mortgage on the property. So we were handling all of that.
So we, meaning Sharing Connexion, was the owner. Okay.
So we're the owner operator. We are property owner at that point. So we're dealing with the insurance and all of that sort of stuff. They were paying us rent on the project, but it was stable with the rent that they were already paying. It's basically a good solution in areas where land value is appreciating really quickly, so that you're potentially saving it 3 years earlier, the cost, rather than, from wherever you end up purchasing it.
Right. No, it's a totally different model than the CDFI model, and that because I mean, Joe, you can always chime in if I'm not speaking this correctly, but like in a CDFI model, like we'd have to have the bridge, like the nonprofit new owner manager, however that was going to happen, would have to have that bridge financing and come in. But what you're saying is Sharing Connexion itself buys it, holds it in for a shorter period, and what is the, and then waits, allows the nonprofit to get the funding it needs in order to get permanent financing. Is that,
Yep.
is that the model? Okay.
Yeah, so we establish a deed of trust on the property, outlining that they're going to buy it within the 3 years. And then there are, you know, certain contingency plans if they can't buy it within the 3 years, but they're really minimal. And so the idea is really that we're coming in to help support displacement issues. So it's probably not the right solution for everywhere in rural Colorado, but you know, just based on land values and, you know, are they appreciating or depreciating?
I think it's great to have other products, right? And like to have
Yeah.
other solutions, and you know, knowing that there's stuff out there that really could use preservation, but we just don't necessarily have the means to the capital or the right place or the ability to get it underwritten or collateralized in the way we need to in a really short amount of time. I think it's great. There's definitely need for lots of different kinds of solutions. So
yeah, and we have your typical acquisition loan solution too, but I think there are certain needs for this, which was proven with this project, and then hopefully we can replicate it with a few more projects.
Great. Okay, now we got questions coming in. So I'll let other people ask questions instead of just myself. Larry Anderson, who's been facilitating a lot of these sessions on our 515 portfolio, said, it's an interesting program for rescue. Do you always own and hold the rescued property?
Yeah, so that's the model of the program. Obviously, like I said, you know, real estate rescue is just kind of our preservation title. So those acquisition loans are a totally different model that fall within the rescue category too. But, you know, for this type of a deal, we would own and hold the rescued property, yes.
Okay. And Josh Griff, who you heard earlier, he's asking, what is your maximum loan amount for a project?
Yeah, so we don't currently have a maximum, and I think that's what's interesting about where we are at in our life cycle stage. So right now, I would probably say like 3 million as far as like a bridge or an acquisition loan would probably be our maximum, but I can't even firmly say that because the board has a strong appetite for essentially whatever. So
you heard it here.
First. We do have, with First Bank, our lending capacity is up to 30 million. We've only drawn a couple million into that. So, and we are looking at other projects right now. We won't be able to go past that 30 million for a while. And so that's kind of where we are. But we definitely can take on some more projects right now.
Great. And then there's a question from Larry Anderson again. Have you rescued HUD or USDA rental properties? Have you used that program yet to work with federally funded properties?
No, we haven't. And that's part of the reason why I'm here. You might be familiar. The reason why I stressed that it is non-tax credit properties is because of the 10-year holding rule, the IRS 10-year holding rule. And so, but that is specific to tax credit developments. So we should be able to run real estate rescue for HUD properties or USDA rental properties. That seems to fit within our model. It could also fit within our model to run it for naturally occurring affordable housing for land that maybe you are not ready to get financed yet, if you wanted a different model other than the acquisition loan. So we could purchase it and be the property owner while contracting ownership out to a nonprofit who is running the facility. But we can kind of be that float period while the other financing is coming through.
So it has to be a nonprofit, right? That's the ultimate beneficiary. Is that the way it's set up, or
for real estate rescue?
Yeah.
Not necessarily. Right now we're pretty much, I mean, the nice thing about us versus some of the other guys is we don't really have any government restrictions. The only restrictions that we're putting are on ourselves right now. And so we're focused on, you know, the same affordability metrics that HUD describes, you know, up to 120 AMI and stuff like that. So we have that focus, but it is solely what we've put on ourselves, and it's all about just mission fit at this point.
And building on that, is there a LURA or land use restriction agreement that's tied to the funding, or what's the process there?
Yeah, so that is something that we have talked about. We haven't established an official LURA, but we would expect to see one. I think that's fair to say. So we haven't set a parameter of amount yet, though, but it's in discussion.
Great. Okay, any other questions? And Joe's available for questions. I see him, so I'm going to offer him up for questions as well. If you have questions for Joe or questions for Emily, or questions for me, like about what's going on with the rest of the Preservation Academy, I'm open to answering things now too. And if not, that's okay too, but I'll give you a little bit of time. Oh, Beth has a question. Here, Beth, I'm gonna open it up so we can hear you talk today, because I finally figured out how to do that, I think. Okay, Beth, you should be live.
Hi, everyone. It's Beth Truby at CHAFA. I just did want to respond and at least provide some information on that earlier question about doing LIHTC projects on tribal lands. And I don't believe that we have ever done any LIHTC, but we recently did do a 12-unit PSH deal in Toyac on the Ute Mountain Ute lands. So it wasn't with LIHTC. As far as I know, there isn't any reason that we can't do it. It's just, I think these deals, like Josh alluded to it earlier, the difficulty with the no lien thing. And so I put in here these challenges coming from the debt side, because I know the Ute Mountain Utes, they don't like to get loans, and they own all the land jointly. So it can be difficult. What do you do? How do you do a loan on that then? And they don't like to get loans. So I think the challenges are maybe on the other side, not necessarily from the CHAFA side. But we, as you can see we did this PSH deal recently, we would love to do more projects on tribal lands if they can be done, and would be happy to work with them if there was some interest there.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Beth. And just for those of you who might not know, PSH stands for Permanent Supportive Housing. So these are really highly vulnerable populations that are served with that type of housing stock. That was actually, I think, Beth, the project I had been talking to folks about, the Penyon project. Yeah. So
yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Any other questions for anybody or comments? We will open it up to anyone who's ready for other questions. And again, okay, Josh Emerson, will there be any learning on tribal guarantee programs like the Title, terrible with Roman numerals, Title 6 or HUD 184? Josh, we did actually just run a HUD 184 section with our native programming, and it's recorded and on our website, and I can send you, or I'll have Adrienne send you a link to that. And we are continuing to do that work. I'm actually gonna let Susan Anderson, who leads that work, speak so that she can tell you what else is in the pipeline there. Susan, you're up. Maybe not.
Nope. Can you hear me?
Yep, now again.
All right. Thanks, Robin. And I have to apologize. I know you want me to speak to what else is in the pipeline specific to our
For the
RFP.
native. Yeah,
Oh.
no, to the native, if there's another Title 6 or HUD 184 session that's coming up, that was his question on tribal guarantee programs.
You know what? I will get that information to you. I don't have it off the top of my head. Especially
That's fine. I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
No, not at all. I mean, I know that they just released the competitive, or not even the competitive, but the next round for IHGB, but I don't I'm about to have 6, so.
But as a
That
plug,
information
an
for you.
enterprise-wide plug, I will say that our Section 4 RFP came out. You might have gotten an email about it yesterday. There is a specific rural RFP that will come out next week or later in this week, early next week. So if you have questions about that, please reach out to me or Susan, who is my director, and we can definitely answer questions for you. Section 4 does allow for operating like staff time as we do pre-development work on projects, as we're trying to connect folks. And then we do have a TA component of that where, you know, as we're talking, similar to what we're doing here with Preservation Academy, making sure that our partners on the ground are able to find financing resources and to be aligned in that way. So Section 4 is a great opportunity there. So just know that that opportunity is coming up, and there will be grants available specifically for rural communities and Native communities as well. And that's the program that we run.
August 20th.
Okay, August 20th is when that gets officially released for
Yes.
rural. and I think we have about 6 weeks for a turnaround to get your applications in. So again, if you have any questions for me or for Susan, just send us an email or Adrian, who'll be sending out a follow-up email on this presentation. I had to plug that for us. And thanks, Don, for telling us that for appreciating this program. I'm really excited to be able to talk about non-traditional options. I think that tax credits are great and get a lot of stuff done, but they're really hard. And it's really good for us to be able to think of ways to do things maybe beyond what we have thought about in that space. So this has been, hopefully you've been able to learn about some new opportunities for you, meet some new folks, and we will be getting out the information for you on all of the presentations and all the contact information in an email probably in 2 days with the recording of this session. And also, again, I'm going to remind you that we have continued Rural Preservation Academy sessions for the rest of the year, almost one every other week until through the beginning of December, and a special plug for our September 23rd Regional Summit. And with no further ado, I will let you all go and have an extra 10 minutes of your day back. Thank you so much to our presenters, to Emily, Max, Joe, and Josh, and have a good rest of the day. Bye.